Hey everyone, welcome back to Restaurant Recap. I'm your host, NBC Boston digital reporter Matt Fortin, and today we're actually talking more about hotels than restaurants, and I'm joined by Dave O'Donnell from Meet Boston, and we're talking about Michelin keys. So this is a ranking system that's kind of being rolled out over the past year or so by the same Michelin guide that does the restaurants, but for hotels. So we're talking about that today, Dave. How are you? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing well, Matt. Thanks for inviting me on. I appreciate it.
No problem at all. So first of all, Meet Boston. You guys are all about getting the word out about our great city and, making sure people know everything it has to offer. So, when these types of rankings come out, what does that mean for the work you guys do in promoting Boston as a destination?
Well, it's always rewarding to get the recognition, right? I mean, those of us in the hospitality and tourism sector work so hard to, talk about the excellent service and the amazing hospitality that really is featured throughout Boston's, we'll call it hospitality assets, right? Those could be hotels, restaurants, venues, cultural experiences. There's so much work and partnership and workforce commitment that goes into making those sort of assets really shine. And yes, there's a number of different sort of media brands and outlets that have introduced various, modes of distinction over the past several years. They are important, because it allows us to take a moment, celebrate the work that goes into it, celebrate the world-class hospitality that Boston boasts, that is really represented when you get this sort of recognition, especially from a brand like Michelin, which is so prestigious, both on, the restaurant and now with the hotel keys front. It creates a lot of pride, I think, for the industry and certainly for us here at Meet Boston.
So Boston, I mean, I think we did pretty well considering. So if you look at the list, this latest list, let's see here. So there's obviously you can get 2, 3, or 1 keys, just like the Michelin stars. So nobody in New England got 3 keys, but
okay, they can obsess over California and New York all they want.
Yeah,
we'll get there.
I know they kind of cleaned up in the 3 key category, but Boston had, let's see, 4 spots get 2 keys. That's Raffles Boston, the Langham, the Newberry, and the Whitney Hotel. And a couple spots out in Western Mass also got 2 keys. And then for 1 key, it was, let's see, a bunch of them. So
it's our Four Seasons. Yeah, both of them.
Both Four Seasons, the Mandarin Oriental. Okay, I guess that's it for Boston. And then a lot of them in and around Greater Boston, the Inn at Hastings Park over.
Yeah, the Inn at Hastings Park, of course. I mean, we consider that. I mean, albeit Lexington, very much part of our hospitality orbit, right? And that's just an outstanding property, that obviously got a lot of attention earlier this year with the 250th of Lexington and Concord. But that is a gorgeous property and a partner of Meet Boston. So we're thrilled to see them recognized as well.
I mean, I thought one thing was interesting that, Michelin was like, look, I mean, the hotels that they honor, they aren't necessarily the most expensive ones that are on their recommendations, but, I'm sure most of them aren't cheap. But they also range and span from historic places to very modern places to, I mean, I think of Boston as obviously a history town, but where do we shine in terms of, our offerings of, modern versus historic?
Right. Well, I think what's interesting about the criteria they use is it's a mix of things, right? It's outstanding and consistent service, it's architecture, it's, what kind of sense of place does it create? What kind of character does it have? And, I think the areas of Boston, we have, great hospitality and hotel assets throughout all of our neighborhoods and of course, Cambridge and beyond. When you look at that area of Back Bay and downtown where a lot of these properties are located, it's a great mix, right? Even some of the properties like the Four Seasons, for example, both of them, it's a internationally recognized flag, right? But we have unique properties within that brand here in Boston, right? We have, of course, the amazing Four Seasons Boston that's off of the Public Garden, and then a very different type of Four Seasons that's in the Back Bay. That's this scintillating skyscraper with residential component as well. It's like I feel like a lot of nationally internationally recognized brands come to Boston with a unique Boston kind of flavor in terms of how they activate here, right? When you think of like the Langham, or again, the Four Seasons, they've undergone just amazing renovations over the past 5-6 years that, well, it's already, a spectacular brand, has again, just like elevated and updated its presence here in Boston, right? And then you mix into that brands like Newbury or the Whitney that aren't associated with these, globally recognized flags. It's just like distinctly Boston, I feel like. And same goes with the architecture, right? Like I mentioned, both Four Seasons, the Langham has outstanding architecture. The Whitney has this kind of small boutique, Raffles introducing that brand in North America, in Boston, is remarkable and deserved, I think. So when you look at that collection of 8 hotels, I think it really becomes a way for Boston to really indicate its own identity as it relates to these sometimes internationally recognized brands, but also unique properties.
I mean, so earlier this year, I covered the fact that the Michelin Guide was coming to Boston for restaurants, and that was huge news too. And I remember in particular one restaurateur that I interviewed for that story was really talking about how Boston's food scene has really elevated especially over the past 2 decades or so. So how do you feel about that take? And also, do these hotels, I mean, they must contribute so much to that whole hospitality atmosphere that we offer, in addition to the restaurant scene?
Oh, absolutely. And, of course, we have some amazing restaurants within hotels. Like if you think about like La Padrona at Raffles, for example, or Peregrine at the Whitney, Grana at the Langham, it's something where it's like we've been able to pair here the aspect of culinary excellence and offerings with just overall hotel hospitality offerings, right? Either way, you're talking about through Michelin, whether it's restaurants or hotels, a very discerning global prestigious sort of recognition, right? That is very consistent with the criteria that it uses. What we are kind of aspiring to here in Boston in terms of that evolving culinary scene, Matt, is, there are aspects of Michelin's brand that we think, especially in North America, can adapt to how we present hospitality assets and offerings here in the US, right? It's, if you ask some people, the brand is very European centric, very much based out of service and hospitality excellence as it relates to the continent and what that means. That will always resonate with discerning travelers. But there are aspects of hospitality, both with restaurants and hotels in the US, that might be a bit newer, more modern, more updated takes on what an experiential offering for a discerning consumer or traveler might mean, right? So what we're most interested in terms of Michelin as it relates to both the food inspectors and also, of course, as we've seen here with the Keys, is how does that story become something that in the US, especially in a historic city like Boston, how does that translate here? We know that their consistency in terms of how they evaluate will remain just that consistent, but we want a Boston version of it to emerge, and we're confident that that can happen. And it certainly has here with the Keys, and we'll see in about a month with the restaurants.
So what do you feel like is European centric about those, that criteria? That's interesting. I hadn't heard that. Or what do people say is European centric?
I think, and there's certain areas of the U.S. that, of course, can do this and do this. But there's an aspect of elevated elegance, sophistication. The white linen tablecloths, the impeccable service. You might get a small plate, but the quotient of deliciousness is something that just like stays with someone even when they go home. So it's interesting, right? Because I think on the one hand, Boston is thought of as one of the most European cities in the States, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of that culture, heritage, diaspora has very much translated here as a unique Boston version. But we're also a very youthful, vibrant, innovative city, right? And I'm not saying there's not aspects of Europe are as well, but I think where the Michelin Guide was born out of, and we're talking about, over a century ago, 125 years ago, it's a version of excellence that is based out of a continental blueprint that we've seen adapt to U.S. realities and norms. And I think if you ask someone in, Asia or Canada, they would say a similar version of the same thing, which is like, how does this model, this prestigious evaluation that was born out of a particular culture, how does it manifest here? Like, how does evaluation get recalibrated here? So that the discerning degree of excellence is the same and consistent, but the character of the destination or the nation is perhaps adapted to a bit to the standards that Michelin brings.
I see what you're saying. And one trend that I feel like I've really seen over the past 5 years or so, especially when it comes to tourism and restaurants and travel, is that people, I don't know if it's COVID where people, maybe didn't travel as much for a little bit, or social media where there's a lot of taking photos of what you do and looking at what other people are doing, but people are really craving experience. It seems to me right now, they want something that's special and different and something that they don't experience on a day-to-day basis. So how do you kind of capitalize on that desire that people seem to have right now? And do things like this help with that?
Well, they do, but I think it has to be applied within the lens of what you just referred to, right? Is that when people travel now, they're going to be sharing their experiences in shorter form video content. Social's been around for almost 2 decades now, but with the more recent advent of, whether it be TikTok or Instagram Reels or stories, what have you, that's how people are going to both share and digest travel content, right? So an aspect of it is certainly the ability to showcase or brag, I guess, how you've experienced a destination, right? But I think what's a bit more authentic or organic to that is that people are looking for more immersive, experiential type of aspects of how they explore a destination, right? That could be a cooking class or a demo. That could be like a neighborhood tour or something where it's like you're not only seeing, where the food came from, but you're part of that experience, right? It could be, a tour at Island Creek, down in Duxbury. It could be a behind the scenes at a brewery. It could be a cocktail class, right? It's things that allow you to learn, right? Experiential as you're experiencing. And I think that also, and who knows where these two things are inherently connected versus just conveniently, complement one another. It's those type of experiences that also resonate with followings and followers on social, right? That gets picked up, that gets consumed, that goes into social algorithms to be repeated and land in other people's feeds. It's just how people travel these days, and of course there is nuance within that, beyond just generational nuance. Some people don't travel that way, but certainly there's a trend that when people explore a destination, they want to have certain immersive experiences and they want to be able to showcase those experiences to their following. Organically, yes, but also in a way that allows them to say, look at what I did in, it could be Vegas, New York, Banff, London, Tokyo, wherever you are, right? And then that'll induce this kind of craving for others to want to have the same thing. And I think brands, destination brands and hospitality brands, are of course a key part of the equation as well. They've had to adapt their models to kind of leverage and lean into that aspect. What comes first? What came first? I don't know. But right now, it's just a collective in terms of how brands in the destination space position themselves and how travelers and consumers like to share their own experiences.
Is that turning into more travelers coming to Boston? Because I think of Boston as being somewhere with a lot of character. I can think of, maybe I'm a little biased, I'm from here, I live here, but I can think of a lot of places that have a lot less character than Boston. And, there's a lot of history here, there's things to do. And yeah, it just has a lot of character. So I feel like that could go hand in hand with this trend.
Yeah, I think it does too, because you're essentially creating hundreds of thousands, millions really, of new ambassadors of your brand, right? In Boston, while it's a very historical city and historic city, it's a youthful city, right? Especially this time of year when all the students come back, and there's a dedicated effort in Boston to keep, a significant portion of our population and demographic here in that kind of 21 to 35 range, right? So you're talking about a city that does, yes, feature all of these, older famous landmark stories, 4 centuries really of pioneering history, but that is still making history. And it allows us to invite people that are perhaps newer to the travel space or younger generations to still be really enticed by the Boston brand, right? And you got to have a lot of students that come from either undergrad or graduate school that stay here, right? And end up working in one of our main sectors. It could be hospitality, it could be life sciences or bio or, fintech, smart manufacturing, whatever. There's all these kind of industry verticals that are very appealing and innovative here in Boston. And I think that kind of forward-thinking energy, and at Meet Boston, we like to say we're a destination that was founded but has never settled. That kind of notion of exploring the destination matters as much, if not more, than the steeped in history kind of destination that we celebrate, of course. And as we get through these, famous commemorations and anniversaries, those are, front and center. And as we get beyond the 250th and towards the 400th anniversary of the city, we're always going to be talking about history, right, in our famous institutions. But there are so many other aspects, dynamic and diverse aspects of Boston that draw a younger, more diverse demographic of traveler here. And when they come and they capture these stories and share these stories, they become, again, kind of like ambassadors of our brand, like sharing Boston experiences, Boston, Cambridge, greater Boston experiences with their following. And you can tell in the way they curate the story, how much they're enjoying what they're seeing and exploring here in our destination.
Yeah. And getting back to these Michelin keys, I mean, when you work and coordinate with the hotels in our city, I mean, do you feel like these hotels should strive to be, on this list? Or do you think that they just need to kind of lean into what they do, be the best that they can? And, if something like this recognition comes their way, then that's fantastic. That's the cherry on top.
I mean, it's a combination, right? Awards, accolades, recognitions are always significant in this industry, right? Because whether you're someone just searching on Google or through social media, like where to stay, where to eat, those things are going to bubble to the top, right? So we know whether it's awards, lists, accolades, like brands like to land on those things because they are positioned and privileged within digital algorithms, right? So just from just like a conversion standpoint, like you're going to want something like that because people are going to find your brand, right? With Michelin, as it relates to the keys and also the restaurants, it's aspirational, but also can be realized, right? So that's what we're kind of encouraging all of our partners to think about, like within that framework. Like this is a prestigious aspirational recognition, but we also have the brands here to do it. So aspire for it, right? And now that we have, Michelin here from both the keys and the restaurant's perspective, we think all should aspire towards that end. And we encourage them to. I don't think that it needs to be anyone's North Star, specifically one award or accolade. But again, when it comes to consistency of service and character and value, you combine these things like Boston does as a destination into your brand or your product or your business. And that's when these sort of awards will eventually, bear fruit and come and recognize you.
Yeah. And I mean, that's an interesting point you brought up too with, I wonder if there's increasing relevancy with not only Michelin, but just other honors and awards, just for the simple fact that people Google things to, find what to do next. And I guess back in the day, you might have had to go buy a guide, like a physical guide to see which restaurants had a star. So maybe it's just more accessible now for people.
It is. And I mean, you also think about the increased advent of AI, right? And how that impacts, algorithms and how people search things. And we know, and I'm learning more about this every day, right? Because I didn't know anything about it 2 years ago. Whether it's a press release or a list or a blog, there are certain trusted sources, whether that is a Condé Nast or Michelin or Travel and Leisure or Bloomberg, that if there's a recognition that stems from one of those media brands that you can put in like a press release or on your website or what have you, that again is going to be recognized and privileged in a lot of the AI algorithms that are what end up in people's feed.
Yeah. Really interesting stuff. Well, so what can we look forward to? You said that the Michelin Guide next month is dropping for Boston.
Yes, the Northeast ceremony is November 18th in Philadelphia, and that's what we're all waiting for.
Wow. Are you privy to any information?
I'm not, but what I would say is, again, like everyone loves the stars, but just being in the guide as a bib gourmand or otherwise getting a recommendation within the Michelin Guide is also a boon to this destination's culinary scene. In any restaurateur or food operator that ends up in that guide, irrespective of stars, number of stars, just in the guide is going to build momentum for us in terms of our ongoing efforts to elevate our culinary scene.
Cool. Well, we'll look forward to checking that out when it comes out. Dave, thanks so much for joining us today. Great to talk with you.
Thank you for having me.